Hello there, namaste. So, I don't know why, I just really wanted to watch this one because it's how a British pirate robbed, and I'm not going to say that, treasure fleet. And I don't care the fact that he's British. It's the fact that he's a pirate. The fact that a pirate robbed. And I'm obsessed with pirates. I always find that kind of interesting because that point in time in history is very shady. Like the children of pirates were executed just for the fact that they had they were the offspring of evil. The whole mindset is absolutely barbaric. So there is no good. Everyone is evil in that period of time because it's all about what side of the coin you land on. Like the pirates were doing what they felt was free and just. And I've kind of been jaded due to watching One Piece a lot, but there's something that's always fascinating about that point in time and the fact that pirates were, most of them were just forced into that because they had no other options. They were, well, if you're the son of one, you have no say. You're forced into that because if Britain finds out, you'll get for it. Even in France and all the places that had, civilization, they take out pirates, the children of pirates. It's just barbaric. At least I always assumed it was barbaric. But yeah, the 120 million Mughal heist. I think that's what it is. Come on, let's go.
In 1696 CE, an ambitious British pirate named Henry Avery sailed to the Indian Ocean and pulled off a stunning heist, ransacking a Mughal treasure fleet that was returning to India from Mecca. Captain Avery looted treasure equivalent to nearly $120 million in today's currency. It's believed to be the largest pirate haul ever recorded. But the attack created political shockwaves. The Mughals nearly ended British East India Company trade in its territories, and a frenzied international manhunt was launched. Avery and his pirate...
Oh, so this was when Britain basically controlled India. So he was... Okay, good. I don't mind. I don't mind if it's gonna ruin trade with Britain. Yeah, go ahead, you British pirate. You do you.
Crew would have to be brought to justice. This is the story of the greatest pirate heist in history.
Henry Avery.
Our story begins in Devon, England, where Henry Avery was born in 1659 CE.
You know, it's funny. I learned about this pirate while playing National Treasure. What's it called? Uncharted 4. They have so much on the history of pirates, and a lot of it becomes fiction down the line, but it's like a lot of them, it's like, where did their treasure go? A lot of it was basically swindled and like traded, and you know, they're pirates. They just blow it all. Like, just like when you have cash in your pocket, it's so easy to just lose it all immediately rather than saving. When you don't have that mindset to save and hold on to it, you just end up with an empty bank account very quickly. So it's understandable how they never had a buried fortune, and those rumors of buried fortunes of the One Piece are left in the world.
As a young man, Avery served in the British Royal Navy as an officer. Young Avery was a simple man. He spent little of his wages on extras such as tobacco and regularly consigned his pay to his family. Not what comes to mind when one thinks of a legendary pirate.
Yeah.
After his discharge from the Navy in 1689 CE,
Why?
Avery worked as a licensed slave trader on behalf of the Royal African Company. It was during this time that Avery began to take personal liberties. He lured African slave traders onto his ship and made them slaves too, against company policy. But slave trading was not...
So he'd get the slave traders and make slaves of the slave traders. You know, I don't know. There's something just in that. The people who are selling out their own end up being sold out themselves, because I guess he thought little of them to begin with, which is also barbaric, because he himself saw the ones who were selling them, the slaves, as no more than slaves just because of, well, I guess, who they were.
Avery's future. In early 1693 CE, Henry Avery returned to London. In London, he joined the Spanish expedition, which was a joint venture between a group of English investors and King Charles II of Spain. The expedition was commanded by Sir Don Arturo O'Byrne and involved 4 warships, including the namesake vessel Charles II. It was a privateer convoy meant to prey on French vessels in the Caribbean. Henry Avery himself was promoted to first mate upon joining, thanks to his experience in the British Navy.
So they basically were paid pirates? They were paid to be pirates? They were, what is it? Recognized pirate, something like that. There's a term for something like that.
The expedition got off to a rocky start. By
They're
late
warlords.
1693 CE,
the term in One Piece is warlords. He's one of the 7 warlords.
expedition was stuck in the port city of Coruña in Spain. Its crew unpaid and angry. The legal documents to leave port hadn't been secured. 6 months passed. On May 1st, 1694 CE, the expedition was finally cleared to leave port, but the crews demanded back pay. Admiral O'Byrne sympathized, and he wrote to England, but it was too little, too late. A mutiny plan was already underway. Henry Avery led the mutiny. He was not only an accomplished sailor, but also of low social rank. As such, he was seen as a leader who would keep the crew's best interests close to heart. Avery persuaded the men that he could lead them as pirates and earn them more than enough to make up for their lost wages. And so, one evening, while Admiral O'Byrne was ashore, Avery and 25 sailors boarded the Charles II and took control. Avery and his mutiny crew escaped the harbor and headed towards the open sea to avoid the authorities. Now, Captain Avery, he renamed the ship from Charles II to the Fancy and convinced his men to sail for the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. Captain Avery committed several acts of piracy and built up a larger crew as he journeyed around the coast of Africa towards the Indian Ocean. These include robbing 3 English merchant ships. 9 merchant sailors defected to the Fancy's crew. Tricking a local chieftain and his men into boarding the Fancy for trade and enslaving them instead. Capturing 2 Danish privateering ships, stripping them of ivory and gold. 17 Danish sailors defected to the Fancy's crew. Looting a French pirate ship. 40 French sailors defected to the Fancy's crew.
Dang.
In spring 1695 CE.
The thing I'm curious about is how many soldiers, because his crew is beyond 60 people now, because there were 20, close to 70. He had to have lost a few lives in the process during all that, because I know those ships hold a lot, but you don't want to overburden yourself.
The Fancy arrived at the island of Johanna, where the crew rested before making further moves into the Indian Ocean. By this time, Captain Avery commanded roughly 150 men. They were well provisioned and operating a technologically advanced warship.
There we go.
Avery and his men had even modified the Fancy, stripping away some of its weight and making it extremely fast. Perfect for pulling off a heist. By mid-1695 CE, Avery and his crew set sail for Perim, an island in the Strait of Mandeb at the entrance of the Red Sea. There was good reason for this decision. Avery knew that the Mughal treasure fleet would be making its annual journey back to Surat from Mecca. The fleet made the annual trip at the same time and along the same route, every single year. As such, it was easy to predict its movements and to plan an attack. The Mughal treasure fleet was the biggest prize in all of Asia, and any crew who could capture it would become wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. But Avery could not do it with his crew alone. He needed more men and more cannons. At Perim, he joined forces with 5 other pirate crews. Thomas II and his 60-man Amity, Richard Want and his 60-man Dolphin, Joseph Farrow and his 60-man Portsmouth Adventure, William Mays and his 40-man Pearl, Thomas Wake and his 70-man Susanna. Avery was elected the commander of this 440-man fleet.
Well, it is his
After
plan.
all, the Fancy was the fastest and most advanced ship, had the most cannons, and had the largest crew. Having gathered his fleet, Avery waited for the Mughal flotilla to pass. During the night, the 25-ship Mughal flotilla slipped by the pirates without being noticed, but once daytime arrived, the pirates gave chase. Fortunately for Avery, the 2 slowest ships in the fleet were also laden with treasure. The Ganj-i-Sawai, the largest ship in the Mughal fleet, and the Fateh Muhammad, its armed escort. The chase did not initially lead to positive results. The Dolphin was proving to be too slow, so it was burned and its crew joined Avery aboard the Fancy. The Susanna also fell behind, and was therefore not involved in the ensuing battles. Meanwhile, Thomas II and the Amity had come across the Fateh Muhammad first, and they attacked it. This was not a successful attack. II was killed in the battle. Afterwards, the Amity retreated, deciding against rejoining Avery's command. Avery was therefore left with only the Fancy, Pearl, and Portsmouth Adventure for its attack on the Fateh Muhammad. The Fateh Muhammad was a 600-ton ship with dozens of cannons and sailors aboard to defend it. Strangely, however, they put up almost no resistance. It's believed that the Fateh Muhammad's crew was weakened or demoralized by their early battle with Thomas II. Avery looted roughly $20 million in today's currency from Fateh Muhammad. He then immediately gave chase to the Ganj-i-Sawai, anglicized as the Gunsway. Captained by Muhammad Ibrahim, the Gunsway was a 1,600-ton ship and operated between 62 and 80 cannons. And it boasted roughly 400 musket-armed guards, as well as 600 other passengers. Simply put, the Gunsway was not to be taken lightly. The Fancy, Pearl, and Portsmouth Adventure overtook the Gunsway when it was 8 days out from Surat, its eventual port of call. While giving chase, a lucky broadside attack from the Fancy severed the mainmast of the Gunsway.
You know, I was wondering if they were going to go for like the rudder or some valuable piece, because if you slow it down, it just becomes easy pickings, especially if you're going circles around them. You could easily take them out. There's something I could kind of imagine it all happening in my mind. I like it when a story is told very well. This guy knows how to talk, because you can kind of picture it all. I kind of want to see this in action. There's so many historical things that could just be so fascinating as a story, as a film, as some kind of short film, all in of themselves.
Preventing it from maneuvering away and leaving it wide open to attack. The Fancy pulled up alongside the Gunsway. Though 400 armed musketmen aboard the Gunsway were firing upon the Fancy, and though the Gunsway cannons were keeping the Fancy at bay, Captain Avery enjoyed another round of exceptional luck. One of the artillery pieces aboard the Gunsway suddenly exploded, perhaps due to a malfunction. Several experienced gunners were killed in the explosion, and chaos spread below deck. During the battle, the Portsmouth Adventure chose not to participate. At this point, the Pearl decided to join in. Its crew boarded the Gunsway alongside the crew of the Fancy, kicking off a 3-hour battle. The details of the battle are unknown, though Avery eventually succeeded against superior numbers. In describing how Captain Ibrahim could have possibly lost the battle, the famed Mughal historian Kafi Khan wrote, "The Christians are not bold in the use of the sword, and there were so many weapons on board the royal vessel that if the captain had made any resistance, they must have been defeated. As such, Captain Ibrahim's paltry leadership was to blame. Some accounts note that he hid away below deck, sending Turkish slave girls into the fray to fight for him. In any case, Avery won. He'd captured the Grand Mughal prize, the Gunsway.
You need people in charge who actually know how to take charge. You can't have weak people in management. Nothing gets done if weak people are in management.
With control over the Gunsway, Avery and his crew subjected their captives to horrific conditions. Though Avery's exploits are impressive, he was not a man of high moral fiber.
Nope.
Over several days, his pirates tortured, murdered, and raped captives for information concerning the whereabouts of treasure aboard the ship. Some captives committed suicide by jumping into the sea or by stabbing themselves. Despite this violence, the attack was a success of legendary proportions. The loot obtained from the Gunsway totaled between 350,000 and 600,000 pounds, roughly $120 million in today's currency. Better still for Avery and his crew, they didn't have to share any of the loot. The only other crew to actively participate in the battle was the Pearl, and after they attempted to trade clipped coins to the Fancy's men, Avery refused to give them their share of the loot. Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was outraged by the attack on his vessels. Not only was his relative aboard the main ship, but attacking Hajj pilgrims was seen as sacrilegious and brutish. Aurangzeb sent his armies to shut down the East India Company's trading operations in 5 key ports for English trade. British merchants, administrators, and others were rounded up and imprisoned in their factories. It's possible that this was done as a practical matter, Aurangzeb seeking to protect the British so as to avoid further chaos. But why did the Mughals take any measures against the British East India Company? After all, the East India Company was not officially linked to the pirates, right?
Well, it did sound like they were originally legalized pirates. Did he just continue on with the mission after everything?
Well, not exactly. See, in the 1500s and the 1600s, Indian Ocean trade was beset by pirates, from Malabarese corsairs to European privateers. The economic threat posed by piracy led Indian powers, such as the Mughal Empire, to hire armed escorts and enter into protection arrangements with European powers. Still, piracy continued to thrive. In the Mughal Empire, it was widely believed that corrupt British officials took a cut from piracy ventures and used their merchant connections to identify potential targets. As such, the Mughals did not trust that the British authorities were as innocent as they claimed. In an attempt to save their operations in India, the British East India Company agreed to provide seaborne protection to all Mughal ships. The East India Company also agreed to hunt down Avery and his crew. A bounty of £500, roughly $80,000 in today's currency, was offered for Avery's capture, and an international manhunt began. And to compensate the Mughals, £350,000, roughly $69 million in today's currency. These concessions were seen as necessary. The British had just recently lost the Child's War against the Mughals, and so they did not want to test the Mughals once again. Aurangzeb was amenable to these terms. Satisfied, he allowed the British to continue their trading operations as normal. Avery and his crew were now marked men and would have to be careful about where to sail and how to trade their wealth so as to not reveal their identities. Avery changed his identity to Captain Benjamin Bridgman, and his crew sailed for Réunion, where they distributed the wealth amongst themselves. In Réunion, the French and Danish members of the crew decided to go ashore. The rest of the crew purchased 90 slaves to do work aboard the ship and to act as untraceable currency. Eventually, they set sail for Nassau, located in the Caribbean. Avery's crew arrived in Nassau and bribed Governor Trott, convincing the governing council that they were simply unlicensed slavers and to let them stay on. Governor Trott agreed, though he soon became aware of the true identity of Avery and his crew. But eventually, the manhunt for Avery and his crew reached Nassau. Governor Trott was forced to relinquish their whereabouts to the enforcing authorities, but Trott tipped off Avery beforehand, so they were able to make their escape on various ships. What was to become of Avery and his crew? 24 men in Avery's crew were eventually captured, with 6 executed. The rest, including Avery, were never captured. It's believed that Avery, under the alias Benjamin Bridgman, returned to England and settled into a quiet life. Some accounts note that he squandered his wealth in poor investments, while other accounts imply that he settled on some tropical island, not in England.
That's fascinating. You want to know this stuff, like what happened. I mean, I'd believe that he'd squander his wealth. Certain people with certain mindsets, they just get rid of everything. They don't know how to hold on to it and live a long life.
To this day, Avery's treasure has never been identified or recovered. And that...
Again, this is what makes the stories of the treasure when they most likely squandered it. I mean, how many pirates they got 20 million worth at the first raid, and how many ships did they have on hand? Maybe someone took some and ran. Who knows what happened? Maybe a lot of it sank. It's just we know that it disappeared. We know that something happened, and oh, it's so interesting. It's always so interesting. That's what makes it interesting, is the fact that so much went on, so much darkness happened at that time, and it just makes it so fascinating. What is it called? The Romance Dawn, the true romance.
Now you know.
Now you know. Yeah. I like that. That was entertaining. It's always fascinating to learn about that point in time and the pirates and the fact that we still don't know nothing. Yeah, it's what makes games like Uncharted, the mystery behind it all, the things that of the unknown, because we want to know. We want to know. There's something, the curiosity of it all. It's like how does that much money just vanish? Well, those of us with empty pockets know how money disappears quickly. But at the same time, you're thinking in the millions. Let's be honest. How many people who, like in the US, people who have won the lottery end up being flat broke working at a McDonald's like 2 years down the road, because instead of, saving several $1 million, they squander it all. They buy a massive mansion. They buy a car. They buy all this stuff without thinking. It was like, oh, this money will last forever. It doesn't. Money disappears. The car, you're paying payments on that. The more expensive the car is, the more payments you're paying on it, especially insurance-wise. Especially if they're foreign, they cost a ton to repair. Same thing with like a house. You're paying on the electricity bill. You're paying on all this stuff. People don't think about that. They'll win a lottery and they'll spend it. So if you go into the mindset of that, thinking like, oh, someone like that just made $100 million. Well, a group like that, several hundreds of people just made $120 million that they needed to disperse amongst themselves. And what are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to squander it. As soon as you start thinking in the mindset of that, where people who've never had money before taste money for the first time and they blow it all just because they think it lasts forever, and then they're back to square one. It becomes understandable that it's like, well, no wonder it's never been found. They spent it all on, well, brothels, and I was trying to think of the word brothels and drinking, and probably throwing it up for in like a bar for like, let's get everyone a drink, you know, like saying that reminds me of the scene from Bahubali where he grabs the gold and he just throws it into, or the rocks, and he throws it into all the alcohol, and then it starts raining down on everyone. It's like that's how I'd picture it. They're just wasting their money. They're because they have it. But yeah, I digress. Yeah, I always find that kind of stuff fascinating. But when you think about it logically, it's like, yeah, they just squandered it all. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Doodles.